We are once more in Bakewell Parish Church, moving the furniture around. I'm here in conversation with John Butler, and this time, John, we're going to again focus on one of the questions put to us by one of our viewers on the YouTube channel, and I'll do it pretty much verbatim, and then we'll see what we make of it between us, perhaps. I'm a seeker for the right way and pray for the right path. I constantly read and read more and more, but I find I get confused. The mind keeps on asking and asking questions, going round and round. What's to be done?
Oh, goodness me, that question touches my heart. I could have written the same words myself years ago. Oh, my dear, what did I do? Well, I know what I've done throughout my life when I've got into those sort of situations. I've gone back to the nature. Do you know, right here, my feet, like yours are resting on the ground. Now, perhaps strange to say, that ground is still, or at least in contrast to our churning mind, the ground is still. So immediately there's some comfort there. The ground is at peace. So there's an old advice: keep your feet on the ground. Do you know, what is so often missing in our spiritual search is the simple common sense. I suppose I've always felt more comfortable in the company of down-to-earth sort of people, blessed with common sense. What is common sense? Well, one part of it is feeling, because feel is a sense, feeling the ground under your feet. If you're not aware of it, you can be just completely going crazy in your mind. But if you just notice and feel the stability of the ground beneath your feet, immediately there's like an anchor to something that is at peace. And the other two, very, very good. You can really call them helpful angels, is the sense of looking and listening. Because if you listen and look, immediately you're connected with what's around you. Now we're in a building here. There are these old wooden pews and windows and walls and that. But immediately there's a sort of a holding. And outside, if you're lucky enough to be outside, there's the sky, the trees and grass, whatever it is. And one is, as it were, held in something that's not going crazy inside one's head. So one has an alternative. Now, starting from the age perhaps at which this young man is, I presume it's a man, is writing, when we're just tormented with these questions, to perhaps the time 50, 60 years later, when if you're fortunate, to reach a state of peace with yourself, with the world about you. It's a long, long process of gradual development. We all have to go through this period of mental torment. I certainly did. But gradually one grows out of it, and we grow into something better. And from that we grow into something better. And from that we grow into something better. And so on. The search for the true, the good and the beautiful is never ending. And these also are like angels to guide us. Instinctively we know what rings true, what is good, what is beautiful, and often we find it in the most simple and ordinary, humble situation. There's no wonder that Jesus chose for his disciples humble fishermen, men close to the earth, not the intellectual, the clever people, the ones that wrote books. Keep your feet on the ground, my dear. That'll serve you better than a lot of talk.
Would it be sound advice then, John, are you suggesting not to bother with books and the paraphernalia of the spiritual path?
I don't think we can, because at that time we are so conditioned to think that this is the way. I'm not sure, and if one pretends one knows better at that age, it's false. We don't. So we're trying to be holier than we are, and that never works. But if we live with it, we'll find that it loses its grip on us, and then we'll pass on from it gradually.
And what about this all too common condition? I think we all have experienced it, of, let me call it, a thrashing mind. It's almost like you're in the jaws of an alligator, of being thrashed from one side to the other with concepts, ideas, maybe triggered by things that you've read, maybe by your own absorbed or almost obsessive thoughts. This seems to be a plague, of almost a virus of modern life. Maybe it's always been like that, but I know that you've suffered from it. I certainly have in the past, and it seems to be a very common torture.
Could you go to that drawer, Phil, and pick out my icon of St. George? I was fortunate to live several years in Russia, and while there I picked up some small understanding of icons. Now this is a classic Russian icon of St. George, who by tradition slew a dragon. Now in the West, St. George is usually depicted as a muscular saint, wielding some instrument of war, physical war, and slaying this dragon beneath his feet with a bit of blood spouting.
Down a bit.
Now in Russia, which hasn't sort of modernized its religion so much as we have, St. George is shown in quite a different light. He is not entering into battle with the ghostly foe, with the demonic dark forces beneath him. His face is completely serene. He is connected to this still presence, and his horse just dances over without hardly touching the darkness beneath. And the spear that he's holding is not a killing spear at all. It's a shaft of light, a shaft of consciousness. Now, if one can just see these demonic forces, which you can describe as a thrashing mind in that way, then immediately you're free of them. If you try to enter into conflict with them, they just get bigger. That's why Jesus says, resist not evil. Because if we enter into battle with these things, they magnify. Because we're feeding them with our consciousness. We're making them more than they are. Now, of course, it isn't easy to see the thrashing mind. But just to go out for a walk, just to look out of the window, look at the sky, or if you're lucky enough to practice meditation, that usually leads you to a certain detachment from these mental torments. You can then see them for what they are.
I note that through the ages, artists and writers and indeed philosophers, as well as spiritual travellers, they've made a priority of walking in nature. Rousseau in the countryside, David Henry Thoreau in Connecticut on Walden Pond. He would spend hours every day walking, and not just for others, not just in the countryside. Kierkegaard, he used to walk every day in his hometown of Copenhagen, and not only did they come up with their best ideas, but I think it also kept them sane.
I was thrilled a few years ago when I went on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, and with my own eyes saw the countryside and the sort of conditions in which Jesus is by tradition is reputed to have grown up in. In his time, so I was told, much of the population, he lived in caves. So it's entirely probable that Jesus was brought up in a cave, the sort of cave which is raised towards the entrance, where the animals are kept in the deeper part of the cave and the people live towards the mouth. So he would have had very intimate contact with animals throughout his life. And Nazareth is it's in a wonderful situation, right up in the high country. I couldn't think there's a more perfect place to meditate under the stars, surrounded by the expanse of glorious nature. And the whole atmosphere of the place is so rooted in the close to earthness. It's all within walking distance, amazingly. It's such a tiny scale. And you can see where he entered into his social struggles with the clever people of the synagogue. It's all in such a small, you can almost hold it in your hand, it's so small. And how he would have walked away from that back into the quietness of the country. I was most impressed by that, and it reassured me enormously that my own love for nature, for stables, for the lovely atmosphere that you used to get in old cow sheds, how wonderfully grounding, rooting that is to our restless human nature. Yes, exactly as you say, Phil. So many of our great seers and prophets and thinkers have have lived at least part of their lives in those conditions. Shepherds. Why is Jesus called the Good Shepherd?